Am I overreacting after discovering my wife's family was behind my vicious cyberbullying attack and that my wife knew, but she hid it for years? My marriage is in a really bad spot after a deep breach of trust. How to recover or how to trust my wife, 30F, again. Every time I look at her, I don't see the woman who has been my partner for 7 years. I see a stranger who stood by and watched me crumble while holding the hand of the people who were kicking me. For some context, we've been together 7 years and married 5. We have a child, 2M. The way we started was like something out of a movie, or at least a very niche romantic comedy. We met at a con. I remember the air in the convention center was thick with the smell of floor wax and overpriced snacks, but then I saw her. I thought her cosplay was amazing, the detail, the craftsmanship, the way she carried herself, and I just had to say something. I struck up a conversation, and the rest is history. From that day forward, she became the center of my world. She's honestly the most loving, unselfish, and decent person I've ever met. Or, at least, that's what I told myself every single day for 7 years. Our relationship was never without its challenges. Like any couple, we had our growing pains, but our biggest obstacle was always her family. From the moment I was introduced, my presence was unwelcome. They are the definition of a clique. They're very close-knit, an insular fortress where loyalty to the bloodline is the only currency that matters. If one doesn't accept you, then you're not getting far. It was like trying to join a secret society where I didn't have the password and they were constantly changing the locks. There are a few family members who broke away from the pack over the years, but no one hardly acknowledges them. In her family, you are either in or you are dead to them. These relatives are no contact and considered the black sheep, spoken of only in hushed, judgmental tones during holiday dinners. I didn't fully understand how my wife's family was back then, but I did know family was extremely important to her. Her whole upbringing was based on family. It was her North Star, her safety net, her identity. Because I loved her so much, I tried everything in my power to make it work. I swallowed my pride, I attended the awkward dinners where I was ignored, and I smiled through the passive-aggressive comments. They didn't really put up with me until our son was born. Suddenly, I was the gatekeeper to a grandchild, and they tolerated me just enough to get to him. But looking back now, the tolerance was a facade for something much darker. Between our wedding planning to shortly before the wedding, I was the target of some relentless and vicious cyberbullying. It wasn't just trolling. It got deeply personal. It started with weird comments on my social media, then moved to my personal emails. Then, the most damaging part, fake bad reviews started polluting my business profile. I've worked so hard to build my reputation, and seeing it dragged through the mud by anonymous accounts was devastating. It cost me some potential clients, people who looked at the 1-star ratings and decided I wasn't worth the risk. I didn't know where it came from or why. I sat up at night, staring at my computer screen, racking my brain for anyone I might have offended. I couldn't find a solution. I'd report the accounts, but it'd take a while for anything to be done, and by the time one was banned, there'd be 3 more accounts coming out for another round of harassment. The whole thing impacted my life and my mental health in ways I can't even describe. It took a massive toll. I felt paranoid, small, and utterly defeated. Through all of it, my wife was incredibly supportive. She was my rock and my best friend. When I was at my lowest, crying out of sheer frustration because I couldn't protect my livelihood, she would hold me. She'd tell me that people were just jealous, that it would pass, and that she was on my side. I loved her even more for her care and how she held me down during that storm. Eventually, the trolling and everything stopped. Just like that, the accounts went dark. I thought the internet ghosts had simply found a new target. I wanted nothing more than to move on. I put it all behind me, focusing on our marriage and our son. I thought we had survived it together. Until the other day. My wife came to me, shaking, and confessed that her family was behind the harassment. I didn't believe her at first. I actually laughed, thinking it was some kind of sick joke or a misunderstanding. But she was dead serious. She sat me down and showed me proof, screenshots from their family group chat. It felt like I was right back there again, in that dark place, only this time the monster had a face. The faces of the people I sat across from at Thanksgiving. They were gloating. They were justifying themselves in the messages. I saw my brother-in-law and my mother-in-law saying stuff like, "Some people gotta learn the hard way," and "If he wants to join the fold, here's his initiation." They treated my suffering like a hazing ritual. They treated my business, my mental health, and my dignity like a game. I knew I wasn't their favorite person, but I never realized they hated me and would go to such extremes to sabotage my life. My stomach turned as I read the messages. I looked at my wife, the woman who had watched me cry over those very same comments, and I asked her when did she find out and if she was a part of it. She swore she wasn't and that she'd never do that to me. She claimed she didn't initially know it was her family until a few months before our wedding. Apparently, one of my SILs, 28F, left a profile up on her phone during a family gathering, and my wife saw it. She saw the logged-in burner accounts. She saw the messages. She says she confronted her family and made them stop. I asked the most painful question: why was she telling me everything now? After 5 years of marriage? After years of me still trying to be good enough for them? She said it was weighing on her, and she had recently opened up to her eldest sister, 35F, one of the family's black sheep. Her sister, having escaped that toxic cycle herself, gave her an ultimatum. She threatened to tell me the truth if my wife didn't. My wife didn't tell me out of a sudden burst of honesty, she told me because she was caught. Nothing my wife said made it better. She knew for years what her family did and she hid it from me. She kept everything quiet. She allowed me to keep interacting with them, allowed me to bring our son around them, and watched me continue to seek their approval, all while knowing they were the ones who tried to destroy me. It hurts more coming from her because she knew firsthand my pain. She saw the panic attacks. She saw the financial stress. She held me while I was breaking, knowing exactly who was holding the hammer. I was pretty numb in the moment. I think my brain just went into a sort of safe mode to prevent me from screaming. My wife was anxious, pacing the room, and kept pushing for me to say something, anything. I told her there wasn't anything she could say right now that would make it okay. I told her that, in my eyes, what she did was no better than her family. They made my life hell, and her first instinct wasn't to protect her husband, it was to cover for them. She started crying and begged me to understand. She said it wasn't like that, and she was trying to make things right with as little damage as possible and mend relationships. She thought she could play both sides. She thought she could silence her family and keep her marriage without ever having to face the consequences of the truth. I wasn't very receptive to her. She wasn't reaching me. Every word out of her mouth felt like another layer of betrayal. I couldn't help her or myself. I told her I needed some time to clear my head, and I needed her to give me space. She was against it. She kept saying we could work through this together, but how do you work through something with the person who was the accomplice to your trauma? I was firm on space. Space isn't a request she's respected. She's constantly texting me, checking in, trying to initiate the talk again. I'm really trying to understand her side. I know how deep family brainwashing goes, but the logic isn't there. I'm trying to move past it, but I feel so betrayed. I trusted her more than anyone in this world. I'm my most vulnerable with her. The worst part is remembering the times I kept opening up to her about the incident even after she knew the truth. I'd mention a lingering fear or a bad memory from that time, and she would sit there, nodding, knowing it was her own mother and siblings who caused it. She encouraged me to let it go and not allow it to have any claim on me. Back then, I thought she was being a wise, supportive partner who had my best interest in mind. Now, I just see it as her attempt to protect her family yet again. She didn't want me to let go for my healing, she wanted me to let go so the trail would stay cold. I haven't confronted anyone involved yet. To be honest, I don't think they're worth the breath it would take to yell at them. If they could do that to a man their sister loved, they don't have a conscience to appeal to. But I've made it clear they're no longer allowed to see our son until further notice. I will not have my child raised around people who think destruction is a family initiation. Now I'm getting texts from the inner circle about how I'm being dramatic, how I'm depriving my child of grandparents and aunts over past family spats. They are already rewriting history, calling a coordinated cyber attack on my livelihood a spat. One of the hardest parts of this is the distance from my wife. Despite everything, she is my best friend and has been my partner in every way for nearly a decade. Now we're like ghosts in the same house, mostly only communicating about our son and other household necessities like groceries or bills. She's hurt by my rejection, and she's been crying often. I hear her in the other room, and a part of me wants to go to her, but then I remember the group chat. I remember the initiation. If I'm being unfair to her. I hate all of this. I want to make our marriage work, but I'm questioning every single interaction we've had for the last 5 years. Was any of it real, or was it all just her managing the secret? I'm just really lost. I need an outside perspective. How to navigate this situation and move forward for my marriage and myself. Am I overreacting? Update. It's been a little while since everything came out, and things have shifted in ways I didn't expect. I read through a lot of the responses I got, even if I didn't reply to most of them. It helped more than I thought it would. Seeing people call it what it was, without minimizing it, made it easier to stop second-guessing myself. I wasn't imagining the severity of it, and I wasn't overreacting. Earlier this week, my wife and I finally sat down and had a real conversation. Not the tense, surface-level exchanges we'd been having since the confession, but an actual discussion where both of us were able to say what needed to be said without it turning into a shutdown or avoidance. Taking space beforehand made a difference. The situation still feels heavy, and there are moments where it hits just as hard as it did the first day, but I wasn't in that same reactive state. She went into the conversation thinking I had already decided to end things. That wasn't where I was at. I told her directly that we were at a point where things could go either way, and that depended on what happened next. There wasn't a guarantee either way, and I wasn't going to pretend there was. She apologized again, but this time it didn't feel rushed or defensive. She acknowledged what her family did without trying to soften it, and she also acknowledged her part in hiding it. The way she explained her reasoning didn't excuse anything, but it did give more context than before. She said she had convinced herself that keeping it from me was a way of protecting me from more damage. Looking back now, she admitted that wasn't really what she was doing. It was easier for her to keep things contained than to deal with what would happen if the truth came out. She talked about how early on, when she found out it was her family, she panicked. Her first reaction was to confront them and get it to stop, which is what she says she did. After that, instead of coming to me, she chose to keep it buried. She admitted that fear played a big role in that decision. Not just fear of conflict, but fear that telling me would end everything. She didn't think it would just cancel the wedding. She thought I would leave completely. She's lost relationships before because of how her family operates. People who pushed back or didn't fall in line were cut off or pushed out. She didn't want to lose another relationship, especially not one that mattered as much as ours. So instead of dealing with it directly, she avoided it and hoped time would make it irrelevant. Over the years, she said there were moments where she thought about telling me. It didn't come up just once and get ignored. It came up multiple times, and each time she talked herself out of it. The longer it went on, the harder it became to say anything without everything unraveling. By the time we were married and had our son, it wasn't just a secret anymore, it was something that would impact an entire family structure if it came out. Hearing that didn't change how I felt about what she did, but it did make it clearer how it got to this point. I told her I didn't agree with any of it. Not the decision to hide it, not the reasoning behind it, and not the way she handled things after. I also told her I wished she had trusted me enough to let me decide how to handle it back then. I wouldn't have walked away without at least hearing her out. That part mattered to me more than anything else she said. The conversation shifted to what happens next. She asked directly where we go from here and what I needed if there was any chance of moving forward. She said she wasn't going to keep anything hidden again, regardless of what it cost her. That was the first time she made a clear statement about changing how she handles things instead of explaining what already happened. I told her I was willing to try to work on the marriage, but it couldn't stay the way it was. The biggest issue wasn't just what her family did, it was the space they still occupied in our lives. There's no way to move forward while they're still treated as if nothing happened. I made it clear that I don't want our son around them. Not temporarily, not conditionally, but as a baseline boundary. I don't usually approach things in a way that feels like an ultimatum, but this wasn't something that could be halfway addressed. There isn't a middle ground where they stay involved and everything is fine. What they did crossed a line that can't be undone, and continuing to expose our son to that environment didn't make sense to me. She didn't respond immediately. It wasn't something she could brush off or agree to without thinking. Her family has always been central to her life, even with the issues that come with it. Choosing distance from them isn't a small shift, it's a major change in how she's lived her entire life. She admitted that the idea of stepping back from them like that is intimidating. It goes against everything she was raised to believe about loyalty and family structure. At the same time, she said that if it comes down to choosing between them and the life we've built together with our son, she's choosing us. That was the first moment in all of this where I felt something shift. Not because it fixes anything on its own, but because I didn't know what her answer would be if she had to make that call. I never wanted to put her in that position, but the situation already did. What made it feel more real was what happened after that conversation. Without me asking, she sent a message in her family group chat telling them to stop contacting me and making it clear that the decision to limit access to our son was something she fully supports. She didn't soften it or frame it as temporary. She took ownership of it in a way I wasn't expecting. The reaction from her family was exactly what you'd expect. They didn't take accountability or even acknowledge what started all of this. Instead, it turned into accusations about her being disrespectful and influenced by the wrong people. Her eldest sister and I were both blamed for turning her against them. There were comments about how relationships come and go but family is permanent, and that she was choosing the wrong side. There was also the usual minimization of what happened. It got reduced to a disagreement or a misunderstanding, something that shouldn't have escalated this far. One comment stood out about how no real man would separate a woman from her family over something like this. That kind of response just reinforced the decision. There's no recognition of the damage they caused, and no indication that they see anything wrong with how they acted. It's not something that can be worked through with people who don't see a problem. Since then, my wife has gone low contact with them. It hasn't been clean or easy. They're still reaching out, still pushing back, still trying to reframe the situation. But she hasn't backed off from the boundary she set. That matters more than anything she could have said during our conversation. There's still a lot to process on my end. The trust that was there isn't something that resets because of one conversation or one decision. It's going to take time to even figure out what that looks like moving forward. At the same time, this is the first point where it feels like there's a direction instead of just damage control. We've started talking about making some bigger changes, including moving to a different area. Creating physical distance from her family seems like a practical step, not just an emotional one. It's also something her eldest sister had suggested to her before, back when we were planning the wedding. At the time, it didn't go anywhere. Now it feels more relevant. We've also agreed to start therapy. Not as a last resort, but as something structured that can help us work through everything without it turning into the same cycle of conversations. There's too much tied into this for it to be handled casually. I still see my wife as more than just the situation we're dealing with. That hasn't disappeared, even with everything that's happened. At the same time, what she did can't be separated from that either. Both things exist, and figuring out how they fit together is where things are at now. Nothing about this is resolved. There's still hurt, still questions, and still a lot that needs to be rebuilt if it's going to work at all. But for the first time since this came out, it doesn't feel completely stuck. That's where things are right now.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Daily Tales Update.